guys, welcome to my channel. Sandra here, and this is my channel Starsinpalm, and welcome. For this tutorial, you're going to need a 12 by 12 piece of paper that's double-sided with any pattern of your choosing, as well as a sharp pair of scissors or a trimmer, but a scissor really helps in this project. Next thing that you will need is a ruler. Any ruler will do. I happen to have a T-square ruler and a Tim Holtz ruler. I really like the Tim Holtz one though for something specific you will see in this tutorial, as well as some elastic bands. I recommend 3mm if you can find them, but if not, you can get the kind that I'm using, and I picked that up at my local craft store, as well as this contact paper, which we will be using to seal our project, and you're going to see what I mean in just a moment. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm doing is putting my measurements where I want them, and I will try to put measurements in the description box below for you guys. I pretty much kind of just eyeballed this based on other travelers' notebooks that I've seen, but there are specific measurements that will help you, but you can make this whatever size you want. As you can see, I marked it with my pencil so that I know exactly where the marks are so I can trim it down with my Fiskars trimmer. This really helps in making straight lines. You can use a scissor, but if you want really straight lines, I do recommend getting a scissor. I just happen to love my Fiskars one because it has a little string in the middle that really helps you see where your lines are and where you're cutting. So I really like that. And so basically I'm just cutting it down to the shape that we will need. And I am seriously obsessed with this paper, you guys. I am like a sprinkles fanatic or something, and when I saw this paper I knew I had to use it to make this traveler's notebook. So now that we have this shape ready, I am going to go ahead and round the corners. This is an extra, you don't necessarily need to do this, but I like it because I feel like it gives it a very clean, professional look, and I'm using my We Are Memory Keepers corner rounder. I will link that in the description box below. Everything will pretty much be linked there. And it basically just makes this look a lot nicer, and it's a lot easier to do, but you could also cut some corners by hand if you had something round that you could use as a measurement with your pencil. Next, we're going to be applying our contact paper. This is almost going to work as sealing our paper, because if you did not seal your paper, this would be a very kind of flimsy traveler's notebook, because if you got it stained or you got water on it, then you could potentially destroy what you created. For the price, that probably wouldn't be horrible if that happened, but I like to keep my things nice and clean, so I decided to use this contact paper, and it basically is matte, but there is a shiny portion as well. I marked off where I needed it, the size that I needed, and I do recommend cutting it a little bit bigger than your actual project. That way you have some, give room while you're doing this in case you're off a little bit, because you can always just cut off the excess, and you have plenty of this roll to go around. I think this roll maybe costs $6-7, so it's very well priced. And I'm just using the lines on the actual paper itself, the contact paper, to just cut that down and make it the perfect shape that I needed to for my little project over here. And now I am just positioning everything to make sure that I have the right position for this. This is the matte, like I was saying, so you're not going to get that shiny look to it. If you want a shiny look, then you can go ahead and buy the shiny version of this, but I prefer things in matte for the most part. Now what I'm first doing is just pulling the top lip of it off, just so that I can make sure that I can kind of position it, because I do not want to get air bubbles. Now you can pull this on and off without ripping, at least that's what I've seen. So for the most part, you should be able to kind of reposition it. As you can see, I kind of do there at the beginning because I want to make sure I don't get those air bubbles. And I like to get that lip of it first on there so that I can use my ruler as almost like you would do with a credit card if you had a credit card and you don't have this ruler, but it has a perfect edge for pushing this down to get all those air bubbles out. And then I'm just going to be kind of pulling on my contact paper from the other side, so just pushing while pulling on one portion so that I don't get any air bubbles. And you can kind of somewhat smooth this out even after the fact, but I like to make sure that I just don't get any air bubbles, period, because it's going to save me time, and also it would probably just bother me to see those. So I'm just pushing, and you're going to see I'm going to continue to push till I get this all down there. And you can use a credit card like I said, but this ruler makes it so much easier. Now that we have that ready, we're going to cut off any excess that we have around our paper, which is pretty easy to do just using a nice big sharp pair of scissors. Once you have removed all that excess off your paper, be sure and be careful when going around the corners. Just follow that guide and make sure you're using a sharp pair of scissors, and that you're not cutting too much off, and that you're just being careful while doing this because it is paper, so you don't want to cut something because it's pretty much kind of ruined if you do that. And once we have that all set up, now we are going to cover the other side of this because we want the inside to be protected as well as the outside. Now you can skip this step if you want, but it's pretty simple and pretty easy to do, as you guys can see, and I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing, but basically it's the same steps. You're just going to be smoothing out, and then once you have all those bubbles out, you just want to give it an extra little smooth in there just to make sure it's really stuck down, because since you can kind of remove this paper on and off kind of like the way you do with washi tape, it's just you want to make sure that it's fully smoothed onto there so you're not going to get any air bubbles and it's not going to pucker or come up at all. So if you give it a good smooth with your credit card or your ruler, it should be fine and good to go. So now it is good to go, and I'm just going to be bending it into the position that I want it, just so that I can create a crease and I know where I'm going to mark off the holes that I need to make in this. And I am using a little bit of my bone folder, but you don't need to have that. You can use whatever you have on hand, including the credit card or ruler you used, to just kind of add a little pressure to create that crease on there. And you don't want to make it a huge crease, just a little bit of a crease, not putting too much pressure. And you might get a little bit of bubbling on the inside, but all you have to do is just smooth it out, and it should just come off after just smoothing it a little bit. That's just initially, because obviously you're creating that crease, so it's kind of creating that little bit of air pocket there, but it will come out, I promise, so nothing to worry about pretty much. Now I'm using my awl to create some holes, but I probably should have just used my paper piercer. I'm punching or pushing through these holes. They're about a half inch from each other, and then one inch, because you're going to be creating 2 holes. And I promise I've already done this once before, so I don't know why I'm having a hard time explaining this. But basically you're creating 2 holes that are quite close to each other, but not too close, because you want to make sure that you leave an appropriate amount of room, which is why you do a half inch from the beginning and an inch from the first hole. And then you just kind of put it in the middle, which you can just measure that to make sure that you're putting it exactly in the middle where you need it. I basically just eyeballed it for that portion of it, but I'm sure if you measured it with your ruler, you could make sure that it gets directly in the middle if you're OCD about things. Now, I was afraid to make a hole in my desk using my awl, because I should have just grabbed like a wooden mat or something, so I just grabbed my paper piercer to make the holes just a little bit bigger, because we do want the elastic to be able to fit through there. So if the holes are too small, then you're going to have a little bit of a hard time getting that through there. So now that our holes are ready to go, we're just going to get our string, our elastic band, so to speak. I'm using the white, but you can use whatever color you want, pink, blue, pretty much whatever you want. And I'm just making sure that I just have extra, because I would rather have to cut some off than have too little while doing this process, because then that would just be annoying. Then you want to make sure that you line up both halves of your string, because you're going to need to take the loop part of it and push it through the middle of your little traveler's notebook. I actually used my paper piercer to kind of push it through the middle, because the hole was still just a little bit small, but I wanted to keep the hole not too big while not being too small, if that makes sense. But you could probably use a Japanese screw punch if you have one of those to create a tiny hole if you needed to. But I just used my tool, and you could do this too, to kind of just thread it through. Now, once you have that threaded through, you're going to take this loop and you're going to make it the length of your book. So, because that's what's going to be holding it closed. So you don't want it too big, you want it to have a little bit of a tension, but you just want it to be the length of your book. So that's pretty much perfect. Then you're going to leave it like that, and then you're going to take your 2 strings and you're going to thread it through the other 2 holes. You're going to start with the holes closest to the middle hole, and you will see what I mean in just a second. And I am using my paper piercer to get it through there again, and just pushing it through, because that's a little bit easier for me personally. But you can, like I said, create the holes a little bit bigger, so you don't have to even be bothered with that. I'm just pulling it through there, and I'm going to thread it through the other side of the hole. Just going to repeat this step on the other side, looping the hole closest to the middle hole and then putting it on the other side, as you will see. And like I said, if you make the holes big enough, then you won't have to use your tool like I did. And basically, once you do that, then you're going to see the magic happen, because it all comes together. Now that we have our strings fully pulled through, we are ready to put in our book. And I actually made this insert myself, but you can buy these from several different types of shops. If I can find any, I will link them in the description box, but I decided just to make my own. And what I'm doing is just taking the string and I'm just pulling it tight to make sure it will hold my book in there, and then I am tying a knot. And make sure that you just do it tight enough that you can pull it in and out, but not so tight that it's going to move around. And I usually like to double knot it just to be safe. And once you have that double knot tied, you're going to cut off any excess while still leaving just a tiny bit of string, because I don't like to cut it down to like the little nub. But basically, our notebook is ready to go, and even after that, you can add as many or as little books as you want, and you have your little closure. And if you want to get fancy, you can even add a little charm on your little elastic band. Pretty much, you know, you can do anything to this. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. And if you guys do decide that you want to add more books to this, it is very, very simple, and you guys will see this in a second, that you can just take another piece of elastic band and just basically make sure that it is all measured out, well, all perfectly like straight. Then you're going to pull it around the spine of your book, and then you're going to tie another knot as well, doing basically the same process, just tying it around the book you already have in there, and tying your knot, making sure that it's tight, but not overly tight, but tight enough to hold a book. And again, I'm going to double knot it, and basically you're good to go. I would add another book for you guys to see how it looks, but I have only created one insert so far. But anyways, if you guys have any questions or you want to see how I created these insert for my Traveler's Notebook, be sure and leave me a comment below. I love to hear from you guys, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you want to see more awesomeness and be part of the Sassy Club, be sure and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you later. Sassy Club, see you later. Bye.